The hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of machines that seemed to underscore the fragility of life. Elliot Granger lay motionless on the bed, his weathered face pale against the crisp white sheets. Tubes snaked from his arms and nose, feeding him oxygen and fluids as if trying to coax his body back into cooperation. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, each breath a reminder that he was still here, but barely. Noah sat slumped in a chair beside the bed, his small frame dwarfed by the sterile surroundings. He clutched an old baseball mitt in one hand, its leather worn soft with age. It had been Elliot's gift to him last summer, a token of their shared love for afternoons spent tossing a ball across the backyard. Now it felt like a relic, heavy with memories Noah wasn't ready to let go of. Outside the room, voices murmured through the cracked door. Doctors spoke in hushed tones with Elliot's daughter Claire and her husband Mark. Their words were measured but unyielding. "There's nothing more we can do," Dr. Patel said gently, his hands clasped before him. "It's just a matter of time now." Claire nodded numbly, tears streaming down her cheeks. She'd always been close to her father, leaning on him for advice, comfort, and wisdom throughout her life. Losing him felt unimaginable. Mark put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close, but even his sturdy presence couldn't shield her from the weight of despair settling over them all. Back inside the room, Noah stared at his grandfather's face, willing him to wake up. His mind raced with questions he didn't have answers to. Why had Grandpa collapsed so suddenly? Wasn't he supposed to be strong? Hadn't they promised more summers together? He glanced toward the door, where his mother stood frozen, listening to the doctor's prognosis. Her grief hung thick in the air, suffocating. But Noah didn't want to believe what they were saying. Not yet. Leaning closer to Elliot, Noah pressed his forehead lightly against the cool railing of the hospital bed. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Grandpa, please don't leave me." For a moment, nothing happened. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the boy's plea. Then, almost imperceptibly, Noah thought he saw something. A flicker beneath Elliot's closed eyelids. A twitch of his fingers, perhaps? Or maybe it was just wishful thinking. But Noah refused to give up. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the edge of the bed tighter and whispered again, this time louder, firmer. "Let me try." His heart pounded in his chest as he reached out and placed his small hand over Elliot's limp one. Something stirred within him. An instinct. A spark of determination he couldn't explain. "You're not done yet, Grandpa," he murmured. "I know you're still in there. Fight, please." As the seconds ticked by, the room grew eerily silent. Even the distant hum of activity outside faded away, leaving only the sound of Noah's breathing and the faint beep of the heart monitor. And then, ever so slightly, the line on the screen shifted. A single irregular blip broke the pattern. Noah froze, his eyes widening as he watched the monitor. Another blip followed, then another. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Whatever had stirred within Elliot moments ago seemed to be growing stronger. "Mom!" Noah called, his voice cracking with urgency. "Come quick!" Claire rushed into the room, her tear-streaked face lighting up with confusion and hope. Behind her, Dr. Patel entered cautiously, his brow furrowing as he studied the readings on the machines. "What did you do?" Claire asked, kneeling beside her son. Her voice wavered between disbelief and awe. I just talked to him," Noah stammered, his grip tightening on Elliot's hand. "I told him to fight." Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses, scrutinizing the data. This shouldn't be happening," he muttered under his breath. "Comatose patients don't respond like this without significant intervention." Elliot's vitals stabilized further, defying medical logic. Though he remained unconscious, the improvement was undeniable. For the first time since the collapse, the atmosphere in the room shifted, from despair to cautious optimism. Claire hugged Noah tightly, her tears now mingling with relief. "Whatever you did, sweetheart, thank you." But Noah didn't feel triumphant. Instead, a strange sensation settled over him, as though he'd tapped into something far beyond his understanding. He glanced at his grandfather's peaceful face, wondering what secrets lay hidden beneath those closed eyes, and why, out of everyone in the room, it had been him who'd reached Elliot when no one else could. Little did Noah know, this was only the beginning of a mystery that would unravel threads of family history, forgotten truths, and a bond deeper than blood itself. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of Elliot's hospital room, casting long shadows across the sterile floor. Despite the warmth of the day outside, an uneasy chill lingered in the air. Noah sat cross-legged on the chair beside his grandfather's bed, staring intently at the monitors that tracked every beat of Elliot's heart. He hadn't moved much since the night before, except to eat a granola bar Claire had forced into his hands. Claire paced near the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She glanced periodically at her son, then at her father lying comatose in the bed. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Relief that Elliot's condition had stabilized, but also unease about what Noah had claimed to have done. "It's not possible," she muttered under her breath for the 100th time, more to herself than anyone else. As a middle school science teacher, she prided herself on logic and reason. Coincidences weren't miracles, they were statistical anomalies. Yet here they were, faced with something she couldn't explain. Mark leaned against the wall, scrolling absently through his phone while trying to appear calm. "Maybe it was just a coincidence," he offered cautiously, sensing the tension radiating off his wife. "People recover from comas all the time without warning." "Noah says he felt something shift," Claire shot back, her voice sharper than intended. She softened immediately, rubbing her temples as if to ward off a headache. "I mean, how am I supposed to process that? It sounds like he thinks he healed Grandpa somehow." "He didn't say that," Mark replied gently. "He said he whispered to him, and then Elliot improved. It doesn't mean he caused it." But Noah wasn't listening to their debate. His focus remained fixed on Elliot, his young face lined with a seriousness far beyond his years. He'd felt it, the strange pull, the way the air seemed to hum around him when he touched his grandfather's hand. It wasn't random or imagined. He knew it deep in his bones. Whatever had happened, it had been real. Later that afternoon, Dr. Patel returned to check on Elliot. His demeanor was professional, but tinged with curiosity as he reviewed the overnight data. "Your father's improvement is remarkable," he told Claire, glancing briefly at Noah. "We've adjusted his medications slightly, but nothing we've done accounts for this level of recovery." Claire nodded stiffly, avoiding eye contact. "And you're sure there's no medical explanation?" Dr. Patel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Medicine isn't always exact, Mrs. Granger. Sometimes the body responds in ways we can't predict, but—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "To be honest, cases like this are rare, very rare." Noah perked up at the doctor's tone. "You don't believe it was a coincidence either, do you?" he asked boldly, his voice cutting through the room like a bell. Dr. Patel blinked, startled by the boy's directness. "Well, I wouldn't go that far, he said diplomatically. What I will say is that your connection to your grandfather might have played a role. Emotional bonds can sometimes influence outcomes in ways science hasn't fully understood yet. Claire frowned deeply. Are you suggesting my son somehow willed his grandfather back to health? I'm not suggesting anything, Dr. Patel replied quickly, raising his hands in defense. I'm simply acknowledging that the human mind and spirit are powerful forces. Beyond that, I leave it to philosophers and theologians. That evening, after the doctors and nurses had cleared out, Claire finally turned her attention fully to Noah. Kneeling beside him, she placed a hand on his shoulder. Can you tell me exactly what happened last night? She asked softly. Not because I don't believe you, but because I want to understand. Noah hesitated, his gaze flickering between his mother and his grandfather. I don't know how to explain it, he admitted quietly. It was like I could feel Grandpa inside even though he wasn't awake. And when I talked to him, it was like I reached him somehow, like he heard me. Claire swallowed hard, her rationalist instincts screaming at her to dismiss the idea outright. But the earnestness in Noah's eyes stopped her cold. This wasn't some childish fantasy. He truly believed what he was saying. Did you feel different afterward? She pressed, her voice barely above a whisper. Noah nodded slowly. Yeah, kind of tingly, like something passed between us. Claire exhaled sharply, standing abruptly and pacing again. Mark watched her silently, concern etched across his face. This doesn't make any sense, she muttered, running a hand through her hair. It's not scientifically plausible. Does it have to be? Mark ventured cautiously. When Claire shot him a sharp look, he held up his hands defensively. All I'm saying is, maybe there are things we don't understand yet. Maybe it's okay to let this be one of those things. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she sank into the chair opposite Noah, her shoulders slumping in defeat. For the first time in her life, she didn't have an answer, and it terrified her. As the hours ticked by, Noah found himself growing increasingly restless. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened between him and Elliot wasn't finished. There was more to uncover, more to understand. And though he couldn't articulate why, he sensed that the key lay in the past, buried somewhere in the stories his grandfather used to tell him about their family. Elliot had always been a storyteller, spinning tales of their ancestors who settled in Vermont generations ago. Tales of resilience, secrets, and sacrifices made in the name of survival. At the time, Noah had thought they were just bedtime stories meant to entertain. Now, he wondered if they held deeper meaning. Mom, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. Do you think Grandpa ever kept journals or wrote anything down? About our family history? Claire looked surprised by the question. I don't know. Maybe. Why? Noah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Because I think I need to know more about where we come from. About him. He glanced at Elliot, his expression solemn. Maybe it'll help us figure out what's happening now. Claire studied her son for a long moment, torn between skepticism and the growing suspicion that there was something extraordinary unfolding before her very eyes. Finally, she sighed. All right. Tomorrow, we'll go through the attic, see what we can find. As the family prepared to leave for the night, Noah lingered behind, placing a gentle kiss on Elliot's forehead. I'll keep trying, Grandpa, he whispered, whatever it takes. Unbeknownst to them, Elliot's fingers twitched faintly beneath the blanket, a sign so subtle it went unnoticed by everyone except the machines, which registered another slight uptick in his vitals. Somewhere, deep within, Elliot was fighting to return. And Noah, whether he realized it or not, was becoming the bridge that would bring him back. The attic was a time capsule of Elliot Granger's life, crammed with relics of decades past. Dust motes danced lazily in the slanted sunlight streaming through the small window as Claire and Noah climbed the creaky wooden stairs. The air smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, a nostalgic scent that brought back memories of childhood visits to Grandpa's house. Noah moved with purpose, his sneakers stirring up little clouds of dust as he navigated the cluttered space. Boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, their labels faded or missing entirely. Old furniture, chairs draped in protective cloths, a rusting metal trunk, formed obstacles in his path. But none of it deterred him. He knew exactly what he was looking for. "Are you sure about this?" Claire asked, brushing cobwebs from her sleeve. She adjusted her glasses, squinting at the chaos around them. "What did Grandpa say again? Something about a black book?" Noah nodded firmly. "A black book with a gold string," he repeated, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of the task. He didn't say it out loud. It was more like, "I just knew." Claire frowned, her rationalist instincts flaring once more. "You just knew? Noah, how is that even possible?" "I don't know," Noah snapped, frustration creeping into his tone. "But it's real, Mom. Just trust me." Claire sighed, holding up her hands in surrender. Okay, let's look." They began rifling through boxes, uncovering everything from old photo albums to stacks of yellowed newspapers. Each discovery felt like stepping further into Elliot's mind, a man who had always been something of an enigma, even to his own family. Claire paused occasionally to examine items that tugged at her memories. A cracked baseball bat from Elliot's youth, a framed picture of him standing proudly beside his father on their farm. But none of it seemed connected to the mysterious journal Noah described. Finally, tucked away in a far corner behind a stack of dusty encyclopedias, Noah spotted it. A slim, black leather-bound book with a delicate gold ribbon tied around its spine. His heart raced as he pulled it free, brushing off layers of grime with trembling fingers. "This is it," he whispered, turning the book over in his hands. The cover was worn but intact, the embossed initials E.G. barely visible beneath the patina of age. Claire knelt beside him, peering curiously at the journal. "It looks like something out of a movie," she remarked, half-jokingly. "What do you think is inside?" Noah hesitated before carefully untying the ribbon and opening the first page. What greeted them wasn't a straightforward diary, but rather a collection of cryptic entries written in Elliot's neat, precise handwriting. Dates were scrawled across the top corners of each page, though many of them seemed nonsensical, like March 14, 1872, or June 22, 1910. These weren't dates from Elliot's lifetime. They predated him by generations. "Wait a minute," Claire murmured, leaning closer. "These can't be right. Did Grandpa lose track of time when he wrote these?" Noah shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. Look." He pointed to one of the entries, which read, April 3rd, 1915. "The boy who listens came to me again tonight. He spoke of storms brewing beyond the hills, of choices we must make to protect what remains. I fear for our future, but also for his burden. How does he carry such weight?" Claire blinked, confused. "The boy who listens? What does that mean?" Noah's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't mentioned it to his mother yet, but those words resonated deeply within him, as if they'd been waiting for him all along. "I think it's me," he said softly, almost afraid to voice the thought aloud. "You?" Claire echoed incredulous. "Noah, that doesn't make any sense. This has to be some kind of metaphor, or or fiction? Grandpa loved storytelling, remember? But what if it's not fiction? Noah countered, flipping through the pages eagerly. More references to the boy who listens appeared throughout the journal, interspersed with descriptions of events that sounded both fantastical and eerily specific. One entry described a fire that consumed the town's mill in vivid detail, down to the names of people who helped put it out. Another recounted a blizzard that stranded travelers on the mountain pass, including a boy who saved his family by following a wolf's tracks to shelter. And then there were the codes. Scattered throughout the text were symbols and numbers arranged in patterns that defied immediate interpretation. Some looked like mathematical equations, while others resembled constellations mapped onto paper. It was as though Elliot had layered meaning upon meaning, creating a puzzle only someone attuned to its rhythm could solve. "This is crazy," Claire muttered, rubbing her temples. How could Grandpa have known about these things? Some of them happened before he was born. "I don't know," Noah admitted, his excitement tempered by unease. "But I think he wanted me to find this. Maybe that's why he told me about it." Claire stared at her son, torn between disbelief and the growing suspicion that she was witnessing something extraordinary. If this journal really means something, if it's meant for you, then we need to figure it out, together. Noah nodded, determination hardening his features. "We start now." As they carried the journal downstairs, neither noticed the faint breeze that swept through the attic, ruffling papers and sending a single photograph fluttering to the floor. In the dim light, the image showed a young Elliot standing beside a boy who bore an uncanny resemblance to Noah. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "With my grandson, June 1963. The date was impossible. The photo couldn't exist. Yet, there it lay, a silent witness to secrets spanning lifetimes. The kitchen table became their makeshift command center, cluttered with coffee mugs, notebooks, and the mysterious journal. Claire sat across from Noah, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she studied the pages he had spread out before them. The symbols, cryptic shapes and patterns that seemed to dance between logic and chaos, were unlike anything she'd ever seen. "This is insane," she muttered, for what felt like the 100th time. Dad never said a word about any of this, not once. Noah looked up at her, his brow furrowed in frustration. Maybe he couldn't, he suggested quietly. Or maybe he didn't think anyone would believe him. Claire shook her head, refusing to entertain the idea. "Noah, I get that you want to help Grandpa, but this feels like make-believe. You're imagining connections where there aren't any." She gestured toward the journal. "These entries could just be stories. Fiction Dad made up for fun. He always loved writing things down." "But they're not random," Noah insisted, his voice rising slightly. "Look at this one." He pointed to an entry dated October 12, 1903, which described a flood that swept through the valley near their town. According to the passage, a young boy had warned villagers hours before the water arrived, urging them to evacuate. "That flood actually happened, Mom. People still talk about it. And the name of the kid who warned everyone? It was Samuel Granger, one of our ancestors." Claire blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Coincidence," she said firmly, though her tone lacked conviction. "History repeats itself. Stories change over time." Noah sighed, exasperated. "Then, how do you explain this?" He flipped to another page and traced a symbol etched into the margin. A swirling pattern resembling a spiral galaxy, with tiny dots scattered unevenly within its curves. "I've never seen this before, but it feels familiar somehow. Like, I'm supposed to know what it means. Claire leaned forward, studying the symbol more closely. It looks like something from geometry class, she said dismissively. Probably nothing. Draw it, Noah challenged suddenly. If it's so simple, draw it yourself. Taken aback by his boldness, Claire grabbed a pen and scribbled a rough approximation of the design. When she finished, Noah slid the journal back in front of her. The original symbol stared up at them, intricate and precise, its complexity far beyond her clumsy attempt. There's no way you've seen this before, Claire admitted reluctantly. Her gaze flickered to her son, searching his face for answers. Where did you learn to recognize it? I didn't, Noah replied simply. His fingers hovered over the page, trembling slightly. I just knew, just like I knew about the Black Book. For the first time since they'd started this journey, Claire faltered. A lifetime of teaching science and relying on empirical evidence had trained her to reject anything that defied rational explanation. Yet here was her son, her bright, curious, utterly convincing son, presenting her with phenomena she couldn't dismiss outright. She stood abruptly and began pacing the length of the kitchen, her mind racing. This doesn't mean anything, she told herself aloud. There has to be a logical explanation. Maybe Dad wrote these stories based on research. He was always reading history books. Or maybe... Her voice trailed off as doubt crept in. What if Noah wasn't imagining things? What if there really was something extraordinary happening? Her thoughts drifted back to her childhood, to the spiritual beliefs her father had embraced despite her skepticism. Elliot had often spoken of intuition, of listening to the whispers of the universe. As a teenager, Claire had rolled her eyes at such notions, dismissing them as outdated superstitions. Eventually, their differing views had driven a wedge between them, leading her to distance herself emotionally from him during her college years. By the time she became a single mother struggling to raise Noah, her relationship with her father had been strained at best. And now, faced with the possibility that his beliefs might hold some truth, Claire felt a pang of guilt and fear of being wrong, fear of having underestimated her father all these years. Most of all, fear of what it meant if Noah truly was connected to something greater than either of them understood. Later that evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Claire returned to the journal alone. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Sitting at the table under the soft glow of the overhead light, she opened the book to a random page and began reading. December 7th, 1889. The boy who listens grows stronger each day. He sees paths others cannot, hears voices carried on the wind. But the burden weighs heavily upon him, and I fear for his heart. Will he find balance before it consumes him? Claire's breath hitched as she read the words again and again. They weren't just descriptions, they were warnings. Warnings about someone who sounded eerily like her son. Someone who carried a gift, or perhaps a curse, that spanned generations. Her hands trembled as she turned the page, revealing yet another symbol. This one resembled a tree with roots stretching deep into the earth and branches reaching toward the sky. Beneath it, Elliot had scrawled a single sentence. Only those who listen can hear the truth. Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she closed the journal, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't fully articulate. For years, she'd prided herself on being a woman of reason, immune to flights of fancy or mystical nonsense. But now, confronted with evidence she couldn't ignore, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. What if Elliot hadn't been crazy? What if his stories weren't fiction but fragments of a larger truth? And what if Noah, The boy she'd raised to value logic above all else was the key to unlocking it. As she sat there in the dim light, clutching the journal tightly, Claire whispered into the silence, half hoping her father could hear her wherever he was. "Dad, what have you gotten us into?" The hospital room was dimly lit when Noah returned the next morning, clutching the black journal tightly under his arm. His heart raced as he approached Elliot's bedside, unsure of what would happen, but certain that something needed to be done. He'd spent most of the night poring over the journal's pages, deciphering symbols and piecing together fragments of stories that felt more real with each passing hour. "Grandpa," Noah whispered, leaning close. "I'm here. I brought your book." For a moment, nothing changed. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the silence, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Then, without warning, Noah felt it again. That strange hum in the air, the same sensation he'd experienced when he first touched Elliot's hand days earlier. It was faint at first, like the buzz of electricity before a storm, but it grew stronger as Noah placed his small hand over Elliot's. And then, suddenly, it wasn't just him anymore. Noah's voice came out low and distant, as though someone else were speaking through him. "The fields, they stretch forever," he murmured, his eyes fluttering shut. "The corn is tall, taller than me. Mama says, don't wander too far, but I do anyway, I always do." Claire, who had been standing near the door, froze mid-step. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched her son transform before her eyes. His posture relaxed, his tone shifted. It wasn't Noah talking now, it was someone else entirely. "The barn smells like hay and leather," Noah continued, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Papa's tools hang on the wall, shiny and sharp. He tells me not to touch them, but I sneak one once, a hammer, and break the handle trying to fix the fence." A soft laugh escaped his lips, warm and wistful. He didn't yell, though, just shook his head and said, "Elliot, you're going to get yourself into trouble someday." Claire's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair beside the bed. She recognized the details immediately. They matched stories her father used to tell about growing up on the family farm in the 1940s. Stories he'd shared only with her, never with Noah. How could her son possibly know these things? Noah's expression darkened, his brow furrowing as if troubled by a memory too heavy to bear. "But then, there's the fire," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It starts in the middle of the night, smoke everywhere. I can't find Papa. I run outside, screaming for him, but all I see are flames." His voice cracked, trembling with emotion. "That's when I realize I've forgotten something important. Something I need to remember." "What is it?" Claire asked hoarsely, unable to stop herself from engaging with whatever, or whoever, was speaking through her son. "What do you need to remember?" Noah's eyes snapped open, wide and unblinking, staring straight ahead as if seeing something no one else could. "The missing day," he said sharply, his tone urgent. "It's locked away somewhere in the memory room. I have to find it." Before Claire could respond, the trance broke. Noah blinked rapidly, confusion washing over his face as he looked around the room. "Mom, what happened? Why am I holding Grandpa's hand?" Claire hesitated, torn between relief and terror. Relief that her son was back to himself, but terror at what this meant. If Noah truly had access to Elliot's memories, then everything he'd claimed about the boy who listens might actually be true. And if that were the case, where did reality end and mystery begin? Later that afternoon, Claire sat across from Dr. Harris in his cozy study, the walls lined with books and framed certificates. A retired neurologist who had once been Elliot's closest friend, Dr. Harris listened intently as Claire recounted the events of the past few days. The journal, the coded entries, Noah's inexplicable connection to his comatose grandfather. Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, his expression thoughtful. Memory is a fascinating thing, he began slowly. Our brains store experiences, emotions, even sensations in ways we don't fully understand. Sometimes, under extreme circumstances, those memories can manifest in unexpected ways. But this isn't just memory recall, Claire argued, frustration creeping into her voice. Noah described things he couldn't possibly know, things I never told him. It's like he's tapping into something deeper. Dr. Harris nodded, unfazed by her intensity. There are theories, unproven of course, about collective consciousness, shared experiences passed down through generations. Some cultures believe memories aren't confined to individuals but exist within families or communities. Your father's fascination with spirituality might stem from a belief in such ideas. Claire rubbed her temples, overwhelmed by the implications. So, you're saying Noah might actually be accessing Elliot's memories? That it's possible? I wouldn't rule it out, Dr. Harris replied carefully, especially given what you've described. But whether it's psychological, neurological, or something beyond our current understanding, that's harder to say. He paused, studying Claire closely. Tell me, has Elliot ever mentioned anything about a memory room? Or a missing day? Claire shook her head. Never. But according to Noah, or whoever was speaking through him, it's significant, like it holds the key to waking Elliot up. Dr. Harris leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. If that's true, then perhaps the answer lies in uncovering what Elliot's subconscious is trying to communicate. Memories often hold clues to unresolved trauma or pivotal moments in a person's life. Finding that missing day might help bring closure, not just for Elliot, but for your son as well. Claire sighed deeply, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. For years, she distanced herself from her father's beliefs, dismissing them as fanciful nonsense. Now, faced with the undeniable possibility that those beliefs held truth, she realized how much she still had to learn, not just about Elliot, but about herself and her family's legacy. I'll keep looking, she promised quietly, more to herself than to Dr. Harris. Whatever it takes. As she left the study, Claire resolved to delve deeper into the journal, to decode its secrets and piece together the puzzle of Elliot's past. Somewhere hidden within those cryptic symbols and fragmented stories lay the answers they needed. And whether driven by science, intuition, or something far greater, Claire knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't rest until she found them. Dr. Harris leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped loosely on the desk as he fixed Claire with a steady gaze. There's something I've never told anyone, he began, his voice low and deliberate. Not even Elliot himself knew the full story. Claire tensed, her fingers gripping the arms of her chair. She'd come to Dr. Harris seeking answers, but this felt like stepping into uncharted territory. What do you mean? She asked cautiously. Dr. Harris exhaled slowly, as if bracing himself for what he was about to reveal. When Elliot was 11 years old, he disappeared for 24 hours, vanished without a trace. His parents searched everywhere, the fields, the woods, the town, but no one could find him. Then, just as suddenly as he'd gone, he reappeared the next day, sitting quietly by the riverbank. Claire blinked, stunned. He was missing for an entire day? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? It wasn't exactly something people talked about openly, Dr. Harris admitted. Back then, folks were superstitious. They whispered about strange lights in the sky or voices carried on the wind. When Elliot returned, he wouldn't, or couldn't, explain where he'd been. All he said was that he was shown things in the silence. The silence, Claire repeated softly, her mind racing. Those words echoed eerily in her thoughts, tying together fragments of the journal, Noah's trance-like state, and the cryptic references to the boy who listens. Dr. Harris nodded. After that day, Elliot changed. He became quieter, more introspective. But there was something else, something harder to describe. It was as though he could sense things before they happened. Once, during a storm, he insisted the family move their livestock to higher ground, claiming the creek would overflow. No one believed him until the water rose faster than anyone expected, just as he'd predicted. Claire shook her head, struggling to reconcile the image of her pragmatic storytelling father with this new revelation. You think whatever happened during those 24 hours shaped him, made him who he was? I don't know what to think, Dr. Harris confessed. But I do know this. Elliot spent his whole life searching for answers. He kept journals, studied symbols, read everything he could about memory and consciousness. He once told me he believed the human mind was capable of far more than we understand, that it might even connect us across time and space. Claire's chest tightened as she processed his words. If Elliot had spent decades chasing the truth behind his missing day, then perhaps the journal wasn't just a collection of stories. It was a map, a guide to unlocking the mystery that had haunted him since childhood. That evening, Claire returned home to find Noah curled up on the couch, flipping through the pages of the black journal. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his lips moving silently as he traced symbols with his finger. "Find anything new?" Claire asked gently, sitting beside him. Noah glanced up, his expression a mix of excitement and frustration. "Some of these patterns repeat," he explained, pointing to a series of interlocking spirals. "But I can't figure out what they mean. It's like they're pieces of a puzzle, but I don't have the picture to put them together." Claire hesitated, unsure how much to share. Finally, she took a deep breath and recounted what Dr. Harris had told her about Elliot's disappearance. As she spoke, Noah's eyes widened with growing understanding. "So, the missing day is real," he murmured, flipping back to an earlier page in the journal. There, scrawled beneath a drawing of a tree with roots stretching deep into the earth, were the words, "The river speaks in whispers. Follow its path to find the door." "The river," Claire whispered, her pulse quickening. "That's where Dad was found after he went missing." Noah nodded eagerly. "Maybe it's not just a place. It's a clue, like the river leads somewhere important." Claire stood abruptly, pacing the room as the pieces began falling into place. "If we go back to the river, maybe we'll find something. Something Dad left behind, or something he wanted us to see." "But it's been almost 70 years, Noah pointed out, his excitement tempered by doubt. "What if there's nothing left?" Claire turned to face him, determination hardening her features. "Then we'll keep looking, until we find the truth." The next morning, armed with the journal and a backpack filled with essentials, Claire and Noah set out for the riverbank where Elliot had been found all those years ago. The journey took them through winding country roads and dense forests, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. When they finally reached the spot, a quiet bend in the river surrounded by tall trees, they paused, taking in the serene beauty of the scene. "This has to be it," Claire said, scanning the area. Her eyes landed on a cluster of rocks near the water's edge, their surfaces covered in moss and lichen. Something about them seemed familiar, though she couldn't quite place why. Noah knelt beside the rocks, running his fingers over their rough surface. "Look," he said suddenly, pointing to a faint carving etched into one of the stones. It was a spiral, identical to the ones in the journal. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she crouched beside him. Together, they began clearing away the moss, revealing more carvings hidden beneath. Symbols, dates, and phrases emerged, one of which sent a shiver down Claire's spine. "Here lies the door to the memory room." Noah looked up at her, his eyes shining with awe. "We found it, Mom. This is where Grandpa's missing day begins." As they stood there, the river flowing steadily beside them, Claire felt a surge of hope and fear. Whatever secrets lay beyond that door, they were about to uncover truths that spanned generations, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The old farmhouse loomed against the backdrop of golden afternoon light, its weathered wood and sagging roof a testament to years of neglect. Claire hesitated at the edge of the driveway, her heart pounding as memories flooded back. Memories of summer visits, laughter echoing through the fields, and Elliot's voice spinning tales of their ancestors. It felt surreal to stand here now, decades later, searching for answers buried beneath layers of time. "This is it," Noah said softly, clutching the journal tightly under his arm. His eyes darted around the property, drinking in the sight of the overgrown cornfield that stretched endlessly behind the house. "Grandpa showed me this place. In my head." Dr. Harris stepped forward, adjusting his glasses as he surveyed the scene. "Elliot mentioned this farm often," he said thoughtfully. "He always spoke of it with such reverence, as if it held secrets only he could understand." Claire nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the field. She remembered running through those rows of tall corn as a child, chasing fireflies at dusk while Elliot called after her to stay close. But now, the field seemed different, charged with an energy she couldn't explain. The air was still, unnaturally so, as though the world itself were holding its breath. "Let's start looking," she said finally, breaking the silence. "If there's something here, we'll find it." They entered the cornfield cautiously, the dry stalks brushing against their arms and legs as they moved deeper into the labyrinth. The sunlight filtered faintly through the canopy of leaves above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Every step felt deliberate, guided by some unseen force pulling them forward. Noah stopped abruptly, crouching down to examine a patch of disturbed earth. "Here," he said, pointing to a spot where the soil looked freshly turned, as though someone, or something, had recently unearthed whatever lay beneath. Claire knelt beside him, brushing away the dirt with her hands until her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. Carefully, she pulled it free, a small rusted toy compass no bigger than her palm. Its needle spun erratically before settling into place, pointing toward the north. "That's impossible," Dr. Harris murmured, examining the compass closely. "This model hasn't been made since the 1940s. How did it end up here?" Before anyone could answer, Noah reached into the same hole and pulled out another object, a folded piece of paper, brittle with age. Unfolding it carefully, they discovered a child's drawing, a tree with sprawling roots and branches marked prominently with a spiral pattern identical to the ones in the journal. Beneath the tree, written in shaky block letters, were the words, "The door opens when you listen." Claire's breath hitched as recognition dawned. "I remember this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Dad told me a story once about a magical tree that stood at the edge of the field. He said it was a gateway to somewhere else. I thought it was just one of his fantasies, something he made up to entertain me." Noah looked up at her, his expression serious. What if it wasn't? What if he really saw it? Claire shook her head, struggling to reconcile the man she knew with the mysteries unfolding before her. But why would he keep it hidden? Why didn't he tell anyone? Maybe he tried, Dr. Harris suggested gently, and maybe no one listened. As they continued their search, Claire found herself recalling fragments of Elliot's stories, details that she'd dismissed as mere embellishments, but now seemed eerily significant. She remembered him describing the sound of whispers carried on the wind, voices calling his name from within the cornfield. At the time, she'd chalked it up to poetic license, a storyteller's flair. Now, standing amidst the towering stalks, she swore she could hear them too, soft murmurs drifting faintly through the air. "Do you hear that?" Noah asked suddenly, his head tilting as though straining to catch the sound. Claire froze, her pulse racing. "It's nothing," she said quickly, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. "Just the wind." "It's not the wind," Noah insisted, stepping forward. "It's Grandpa. He's trying to show us something." Without waiting for permission, he began walking briskly through the field, following the faint hum of the whispers. Claire and Dr. Harris hurried after him, their footsteps crunching against the dry earth. After several minutes, they emerged into a clearing where the corn gave way to an open space dominated by a massive oak tree. Its gnarled branches stretched skyward, its trunk etched with deep grooves that formed a perfect spiral. "This is it," Noah breathed, awestruck. "This is the tree from the drawing." Claire approached cautiously, her hand reaching out to touch the rough bark. As her fingers grazed the surface, a jolt of electricity shot through her, and she stumbled back, gasping. Images flashed before her eyes. Elliot as a boy, standing beneath the tree, a blinding light enveloping him, and then darkness, punctuated by whispers that grew louder and clearer. "The memory room," she whispered, clutching her chest. "It's real." Dr. Harris watched her carefully, his brow furrowed with concern. "Claire, are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands were shaking. I think I saw what happened to Dad that day. This tree, it's connected to everything. To the missing day, to the journal, to Noah." Noah stepped closer, his young face lined with determination. "Then we need to go inside. We need to find him." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of what they were proposing hung heavy in the air. They were teetering on the edge of something extraordinary, something that defied logic and reason. Yet none of them doubted the truth anymore. Whatever lay beyond the spiral-marked tree, it held the key to unlocking Elliot's mystery, and perhaps their own. "All right," Claire said finally, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Let's do it, together." With the compass in hand and the journal clutched tightly against her chest, Claire led the way toward the ancient oak, ready to step through the doorway into the unknown. The deeper they ventured into the woods, the more oppressive the silence became. It wasn't just the absence of human noise. It was as though nature itself had gone still. Leaves didn't rustle in the breeze. Insects didn't chirp or buzz. Even the distant calls of birds that usually filled the forest were eerily absent. The air felt heavy, charged with an almost electric tension. And then, through a break in the trees, they saw it. The massive oak from the drawing. Its twisted branches clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers, its trunk etched with the same spiral pattern Noah and Claire had seen in the journal. But what struck them most was the unnatural quiet surrounding the tree. It stood isolated, as if the world had drawn back from it, leaving it untouched by life. "This is it," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible over the suffocating silence. She clutched the journal tightly, her knuckles white against the worn leather cover. This is where everything leads. Noah stepped forward cautiously, his sneakers crunching softly on the dry leaves beneath his feet. He circled the base of the tree, studying the roots that snaked outward like veins, gripping the earth with ancient strength. Then he stopped abruptly, crouching down near a patch of loose soil. "Something's here," he said, brushing away dirt with his hands. Beneath the surface, something metallic glinted faintly in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. Claire and Dr. Harris joined him, kneeling beside the exposed object. Together, they unearthed a small tin box, its once shiny surface now dulled by time and corrosion. The lid was slightly ajar, revealing hints of its contents. Noah carefully opened it, his breath catching as he lifted out 3 items: a tarnished silver locket, a faded photograph, and a brittle newspaper clipping. The photograph was the first thing Claire examined. In it, a young Elliot, no older than 11, stood beside a boy who bore an uncanny resemblance to Noah. Both wore solemn expressions, their eyes fixed on something beyond the camera's lens. The background was blurred, but the towering shape of the spiral-marked tree loomed faintly behind them. "This can't be real," Claire murmured, her voice trembling. "This photo couldn't exist. Dad would have been about Noah's age when this was taken, but who's the other boy? And why does he look so much like—" "Noah," Dr. Harris finished for her, his tone hushed. "It's impossible, yet undeniable." Noah stared at the image, his heart racing. For a moment he thought he could hear whispers again, soft, fleeting voices carried on the wind. They weren't speaking words exactly, but rather impressions, feelings, a sense of urgency, of purpose. "What's inside the locket?" he asked, suddenly, breaking the spell. Claire turned her attention to the delicate piece of jewelry, prying it open with trembling fingers. Inside was another photograph. A woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her features were familiar, though Claire couldn't immediately place her. Beside the photo was inscribed a single line: "She will guide you through the silence." Before anyone could comment, Noah unfolded the newspaper clipping. The headline leapt off the yellowed page. "Boy found after 24 hours. Says he spoke with God." Beneath the bold print was a grainy black-and-white picture of a young Elliot, wide-eyed and pale, standing beside his parents outside the farmhouse. The article recounted how Elliot had vanished without explanation only to reappear the following day, claiming he'd been shown visions and truths too profound to describe. Quoting local townsfolk, the reporter speculated wildly about divine intervention, alien encounters, and psychological trauma. "They thought he was crazy," Claire whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she read the words aloud. "They dismissed him, laughed at him, even mocked him. No wonder he kept these secrets buried." "But he didn't forget," Noah said quietly, his gaze fixed on the spiral carved into the tree. "He remembered. And he wanted us to remember too." Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, peering closely at the artifacts spread before them. "These aren't random objects," he observed. "Each one tells part of the story: the locket, the photograph, the newspaper. They're pieces of a puzzle meant to lead someone, you, to the truth." Claire nodded slowly, piecing together the implications. The tree isn't just a symbol, she realized. It's a doorway, a connection to whatever happened during those 24 hours Dad went missing. As she spoke, the ground beneath them seemed to hum faintly, vibrating with an energy that resonated deep within their bones. Noah reached out instinctively, placing his hand against the rough bark of the tree. Instantly, the spiral began to glow faintly, pulsing with a soft golden light. "Mom," Noah said urgently, his voice tinged with awe. "I think we're supposed to go inside." Claire hesitated, torn between fear and determination. She glanced at Dr. Harris, who looked equally unsettled but nodded encouragingly. "If there's even a chance this will help Elliot." He trailed off, letting the unspoken implication hang in the air. Taking a deep breath, Claire placed her own hand on the tree beside Noah's. The warmth of the light enveloped them both, and for a fleeting moment she felt connected, not just to her father, but to something far greater, something timeless. "All right," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Let's find out what's waiting for us on the other side." As they stepped closer to the glowing spiral, the whispers grew louder, weaving together into a single, clear message. "Listen." Back in the quiet sanctuary of Elliot's hospital room, Claire sat alone with the journal spread open across her lap. The artifacts from the tin box, the locket, the photograph, and the newspaper clipping lay on the bedside table, their significance heavy in the air. Outside, the world continued its steady rhythm, oblivious to the storm of revelations brewing within her. But here, in this sterile cocoon of beeping machines and fluorescent lights, time seemed to stand still. Her fingers traced the edges of the journal's pages as she flipped back to an entry dated July 15th, 1948. It was written shortly after Elliot's return from the missing day. Its words raw and unfiltered, like a confession poured onto paper in the dead of night. "I saw him today, the boy who stepped out of the light. He called himself a listener, though I didn't understand what that meant at first. He said we were connected, bound by something older than time itself, that I had been chosen to carry memory through my bloodline, to ensure the truths whispered in the silence would never fade." Claire paused, her breath hitching as she read the next line. "He told me one day another would come, a child born of my family who would hear the whispers louder than anyone before, a listener greater than me. And when that day came, I would need to prepare them for the burden they would inherit." Tears blurred her vision as she turned the page, where Elliot had sketched another spiral surrounded by cryptic symbols. Beneath it, he wrote, "The tree is not just a door, it is a keeper of stories. Stories of those who came before us and those yet to arrive. To enter is to walk among memories, to bear witness to moments lost to time. But beware, not all memories are kind. Some wounds run too deep to heal without scars." Claire closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of her father's words. She thought of Noah, his quiet conviction, his uncanny ability to sense things no one else could, and realized with a pang of guilt how much she'd underestimated him. All these years, she'd dismissed his intuition as childish imagination, just as she dismissed Elliot's beliefs as flights of fancy. Now, faced with undeniable evidence that both were part of something far greater, she felt the full force of her denial crashing down around her. Noah entered the room quietly, his arms laden with snacks and a fresh notebook. When he saw his mother sitting motionless beside Elliot's bed, tears streaming silently down her face, he froze. "Mom," he asked softly, setting the food aside. "Are you okay?" Claire looked up, forcing a shaky smile as she wiped her cheeks. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "Just reading your grandfather's journal." Noah approached cautiously, peering over her shoulder at the open page. His brow furrowed as he scanned the passage about the listener. "So, Grandpa knew," he murmured. "He knew about me." "He believed in you," Claire corrected gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Even when I didn't." Noah met her gaze, his expression softening. You do now, though, right? You believe me? Claire hesitated, searching for the right words. How could she explain the whirlwind of emotions raging inside her? The fear, the awe, the regret? Finally, she nodded. Yes, she admitted quietly. I believe you, and I'm sorry it took me so long. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the machines filled the silence, a reminder of the fragile thread tethering Elliot to life. Then Noah broke the quiet, his voice tinged with determination. We have to finish this, Mom. We have to go back to the tree and find Grandpa's missing piece, the memory he left behind. Claire sighed deeply, torn between protecting her son and honoring her father's legacy. It's dangerous, Noah. What if we uncover something we can't handle? What if the memories hurt more than they help? Isn't that why we're doing this? Noah countered softly. To make sure Grandpa doesn't stay trapped forever? To fix what's broken, not just for him, but for us, too. His words struck a chord deep within Claire. For years, she distanced herself from Elliot's spiritual beliefs, rejecting what she couldn't explain. But now, faced with the possibility that those beliefs held truth, she realized she'd also rejected a part of herself. A part that longed to understand, to connect, to listen. You're braver than I ever was, she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. All right, let's see this through. Together. That evening, armed with the journal, the artifacts, and a newfound resolve, Claire and Noah returned to the spiral-marked tree. The forest was darker now, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the ground. Yet the golden glow emanating from the spiral remained constant, beckoning them forward. As they stood before the ancient oak, Claire opened the locket once more, studying the photograph of the woman with the kind eyes. Her inscription echoed in her mind. She will guide you through the silence. Who is she? Noah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Claire admitted, but I think she's waiting for us, on the other side. Taking a deep breath, Claire reached out and placed her hand on the glowing spiral. Noah followed suit, his small fingers trembling against hers. The hum grew louder, vibrating through their bodies as the world around them dissolved into light. When the brightness faded, they found themselves standing in a vast, ethereal expanse, a space filled with floating fragments of memory. Each shard shimmered like glass, reflecting scenes from lives long past. Elliot as a boy beneath the tree, his parents working the fields, ancestors gathered around fires telling stories of resilience and hope. And then, amidst the swirling fragments, they saw him, the strange boy from the photograph. He stood calmly, his presence radiating warmth and wisdom beyond his years. Behind him stood the woman from the locket, her smile gentle and knowing. You've come, the boy said simply, his voice resonating like a melody carried on the wind. The listener has awakened. Noah stepped forward, his heart pounding. What do we do now? The boy extended a hand, motioning toward a single radiant shard hovering nearby. Within it, Claire glimpsed Elliot, younger, vibrant, standing beside the same boy in a moment frozen in time. To save him, the boy replied, you must remember what he forgot. With that, the shard began to pulse, drawing them closer. As Claire and Noah reached out to touch it, the memories surged forward, flooding their minds with visions of love, loss, and legacy. They understood now why Elliot had kept his secrets, and why he had entrusted them to carry the torch. In that moment, Claire finally accepted the truth she'd spent a lifetime denying. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, They were meant to be shared, and as the whispers of the past embraced her, she vowed to honor her father's legacy no matter where it led. Because sometimes, the greatest act of courage is learning to listen. The hospital room was bathed in the soft glow of dawn when Claire and Noah returned, their faces etched with exhaustion but also a quiet resolve. The journey to the memory room had left them changed, both physically drained and emotionally raw, but they carried something intangible with them now. Clarity. Noah approached Elliot's bedside first, his small frame dwarfed by the weight of what he'd seen and felt in the ethereal expanse beneath the spiral-marked tree. He placed a hand lightly on his grandfather's arm, feeling the warmth of life still clinging stubbornly to the fragile body before him. For a moment, he simply stood there, gathering courage. Claire lingered near the doorway, watching her son with a mixture of awe and trepidation. She didn't fully understand everything that had transpired in the memory room. The shards of light, the boy who seemed timeless, the woman whose smile radiated kindness. But she trusted Noah. More importantly, she trusted Elliot's faith in him. "Grandpa," Noah began softly, his voice steady despite the tears pooling in his eyes. "I found it. I remembered for you." He leaned closer, his words barely audible over the rhythmic beeping of the machines. "The day is remembered now." At first, nothing happened. The monitors continued their steady hum, indifferent to the significance of the moment. Then, ever so faintly, Elliot's fingers twitched beneath the blanket. His eyelids fluttered, struggling against the pull of unconsciousness. Claire gasped, rushing to his side as the heart monitor registered a sudden spike in activity. "Elliot," she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. "Can you hear us?" Slowly, painfully, Elliot's eyes opened. They were clouded with confusion at first, darting around the room as if trying to piece together where, or when, he was. But then his gaze landed on Noah, and recognition softened his weathered features. A weak smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Elliot rasped, his voice barely more than a breath. Yet each word carried the weight of decades-long secrets finally coming to light. Noah nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, Grandpa, I heard it." Elliot's smile widened slightly, though speaking clearly remained a struggle. "The listener," he murmured, his voice trailing off as his strength waned. "You're stronger than I ever was." Claire choked back a sob, squeezing her father's hand even tighter. "Dad, we thought we'd lost you." Elliot turned his head slightly toward her, his expression filled with both love and apology. "Not lost," he said hoarsely. "Just waiting for someone to remember." A hush fell over the room as the magnitude of the moment settled around them. Outside, the early morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting golden streaks across the floor. It was as if the world itself paused to honor the reunion. A grandfather returning from the depths of silence, guided home by the boy who listened. Later that day, after doctors and nurses had flooded the room with tests and exclamations of disbelief, Claire found herself sitting alone with Elliot, while Noah slept curled up in a chair nearby. Her father looked frail but peaceful, his breathing shallow but steady. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the quiet, "for not believing you, for thinking your stories were just fanciful nonsense." Elliot shook his head slowly, reaching out to pat her hand. "You weren't ready," he replied gently. "None of us are, until the moment comes. And now—" His gaze drifted to Noah, his expression softening further. "Now, you've both taken the first step." Claire swallowed hard, brushing away a stray tear. What happens next? What does this mean for Noah? For all of us? Elliot hesitated, his eyes growing distant as if recalling the vast expanse of memories they'd uncovered together. The whispers don't stop, he said quietly. They'll guide him, as they guided me. But the burden isn't his alone to bear. You'll help him carry it. Claire nodded, determination hardening her features. I will, whatever it takes. Elliot smiled again, his eyes closing briefly as fatigue overtook him. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Thank you, he whispered, for bringing me back. As sleep claimed him once more, Claire sat silently, holding his hand and letting the enormity of everything wash over her. She thought of the journal, the artifacts, the glowing spiral, and how each piece had led them here, to this fragile yet profound moment of connection. In the corner of the room, Noah stirred, his young face serene in slumber. Claire glanced at him, marveling at the strength within him, strength she hadn't recognized until now. Strength passed down through generations, carried forward by those willing to listen. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, filling the room with its warm embrace, Claire realized that some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. They were meant to bind families closer together, through whispers, through memories, through love. Because sometimes the greatest answers lie not in knowing, but in remembering. The days following Elliot's awakening passed in a blur of recovery and revelation. Though still weak, Elliot grew stronger with each passing hour, his mind sharp despite the toll his body had endured. Claire and Noah spent every available moment at his side, piecing together fragments of the mystery that had bound their family across generations. But it wasn't until the third day, when Elliot summoned them to his bedside with a knowing smile, that they uncovered yet another layer of the enigma. I've been waiting for the right time, Elliot began, his voice raspy but steady as he reached beneath his pillow. He pulled out a small dusty shoebox and placed it carefully on his lap. This is for you two, and Dr. Harris, if he's willing to listen. Claire frowned, curiosity mingling with apprehension. What is it? Elliot opened the box, revealing a collection of old cassette tapes, their labels scrawled in his familiar handwriting. Dates spanned decades, from the late 1940s to the early 2000s. Some were marked simply with phrases like, "The river speaks," or "Voices in the cornfield," while others bore cryptic symbols Claire recognized from the journal. These are my recordings, Elliot explained, his tone tinged with both pride and sorrow. Stories I couldn't tell anyone, not even your mother, Claire. Visions I saw in the silence. Confessions I needed to make but couldn't bring myself to say aloud. Noah leaned forward, his eyes wide with wonder. Are these memories, like the ones we found in the tree? In a way, Elliot replied, his gaze softening as it settled on his grandson, but also warnings, and questions I never found answers to. Later that evening, Claire, Noah, and Dr. Harris gathered around an old tape player in the hospital's private consultation room, its speakers crackling faintly as they inserted the first cassette. The label read, March 12, 1956, The Woman by the Tree. Elliot's younger voice filled the room, trembling with emotion. I don't know why I'm recording this. Maybe because writing it down feels too permanent, too real. Last night, I saw her again, the woman who calls to me from the woods. She stands near the spiral-marked tree, her face pale, her hands reaching out as if begging for help. She doesn't speak, but I hear her voice in my mind. Find me. At first, I thought she was part of the same vision that took me during those 24 hours when I disappeared as a boy, but now I'm not so sure. Yesterday, I overheard Mrs. Callahan talking about Sarah Whitaker, a woman who vanished without a trace in 1955. No one knows what happened to her. They searched the woods, the river, everywhere, nothing. When I close my eyes, I see Sarah standing beneath a tree, her dress torn, her eyes filled with fear. She points to the ground, to the roots, and whispers, "Here." But when I go there, all I find is dirt and silence. The tape ended abruptly, leaving the room heavy with unspoken implications. Claire stared at the player, her heart racing. "Dad knew about this?" she asked, turning to Elliot, who sat quietly in his wheelchair. "Why didn't he tell anyone?" "He tried," Elliot admitted, his expression pained. "But no one believed him. Back then, people thought I was eccentric, or worse, unstable. So I kept it to myself, recorded it instead." Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, studying the remaining tapes with newfound urgency. If what Elliot says is true, then Sarah Whitaker's disappearance might be connected to the same force or phenomenon that brought him to the memory room. Perhaps the tree isn't just a doorway for memories. It's also a marker for something darker. Claire's stomach churned at the thought. "You mean, like, evidence of a crime?" "It's possible," Dr. Harris replied cautiously. "If Sarah was buried near the tree, as Elliot's vision suggests, then her remains could still be there, along with answers about what really happened to her." Noah looked up, his young face etched with determination. "We have to go back," he said firmly. "We have to find her." The next morning, armed with shovels and renewed purpose, Claire, Noah, and Dr. Harris returned to the spiral-marked tree. The forest was eerily quiet once more, the air thick with anticipation. As they approached the ancient oak, Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Not just from the cold, but from the weight of history pressing against her. This is where she pointed. Elliot had told them before they left the hospital, near the largest root, closest to the trunk. Working together, they began digging beneath the massive root, their movements methodical yet urgent. The soil was damp and compact, resisting their efforts, but they pressed on. After nearly an hour of grueling labor, Noah's shovel struck something hard. "Here!" he called out, dropping to his knees to brush away the dirt. Beneath the surface lay the remnants of a wooden box, its edges rotted with age. Inside, wrapped in tattered fabric, were human bones. Claire stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Dr. Harris knelt beside the discovery, examining it carefully. "These belong to someone who's been here a long time," he murmured grimly. "Decades, at least." As they stood silently, absorbing the gravity of the moment, Claire noticed something else partially buried nearby. Reaching down, she unearthed a tarnished locket identical to the one they'd found in the tin box. Inside was a faded photograph of a smiling woman, Sarah Whitaker. "She wanted us to find her," Noah whispered, his voice trembling. "That's why Grandpa saw her, why he heard her call." Claire nodded, clutching the locket tightly. "And now she can rest." Back at the hospital, Elliot listened intently as they recounted the discovery, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I always wondered if I'd failed her," he confessed softly. "If I should have done more to bring her home." "You did everything you could," Claire assured him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "And now, thanks to you and Noah, we've given her justice." Elliot smiled weakly, his gaze drifting to his grandson. "He's the listener," he said proudly, "the one who hears what others can't, who sees what's hidden." Noah blushed, ducking his head shyly, but Claire saw the spark of resolve in his eyes. the same spark that had guided them through the mysteries of the past few weeks. As the sun set outside, casting golden light into the hospital room, Claire realized that their journey was far from over. The tapes held countless other stories, visions and questions waiting to be explored. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, she faced it with a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in her life, Claire understood that some truths weren't meant to remain buried, and that sometimes the greatest act of love was the courage to listen. Elliot's passing came quietly, like the fading of twilight into night. It wasn't sudden or unexpected. Rather, it felt inevitable, as though he had fulfilled his purpose and could now rest. Surrounded by Claire, Noah, and Dr. Harris, Elliot slipped away with a serene smile on his face, his hand clasped gently in his daughter's. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the machines that no longer fought to keep him tethered to this world. Claire sat motionless, her father's hand still cradled in hers, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. For all the years she distanced herself from his beliefs, she now understood the depth of his love and the weight of the legacy he'd entrusted to them. Noah stood beside her, his young face solemn but resolute. He reached out to touch Elliot's hand one last time, closing his eyes briefly as if listening for something only he could hear. When he opened them again, there was a glimmer of understanding in his gaze, a quiet acceptance of what lay ahead. In the days that followed, the Granger household transformed subtly but profoundly. The black journal became a fixture on the kitchen table, its pages filled with new entries written in Noah's careful handwriting. He documented everything: the whispers he heard, the symbols he deciphered, the fleeting visions that came to him in dreams. Each word was a step forward, a continuation of the work Elliot had started. Claire, too, found herself changed. Gone was the rigid adherence to logic and reason that had once defined her teaching career. Instead, she began weaving emotion and intuition into her lessons, encouraging her students to explore history not just as dates and facts, but as stories of humanity, of resilience, loss, and hope. She spoke often of Elliot, sharing his tales of ancestors who braved storms and hardships, inspiring her students to connect with their own roots. When news broke that the case of Sarah Whitaker's disappearance had been reopened thanks to evidence uncovered near the spiral-marked tree, the town buzzed with speculation. Some dismissed it as coincidence, others whispered about the supernatural forces at play. But Claire and Noah knew better. They understood that Sarah's story was part of a larger tapestry, a thread connecting past to present, memory to truth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and bathed the living room in warm hues, Claire sat beside Noah on the couch. The boy flipped through the journal, pausing occasionally to jot down notes or sketch symbols that seemed to materialize in his mind unbidden. "You're carrying this well," Claire said softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Are you sure you're okay?" Noah nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful. "It's not easy," he admitted. "But I know Grandpa wouldn't have given this to me if he didn't think I could handle it." Claire smiled faintly, her heart swelling with pride. "He believed in you more than anyone else ever has." For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, the ticking of the clock mingling with the rustle of turning pages. Then Noah glanced up, his eyes wide with an intensity that sent a shiver down Claire's spine. "He says we're not done yet," Noah whispered, his voice barely audible. Claire froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Who says?" Noah hesitated, then pointed to the journal. "Grandpa. He's still here." In the silence, "He told me there are more stories waiting to be found, more people who need us to listen. A wave of emotions washed over Claire. Grief, wonder, fear, but above all, determination. She thought of the artifacts they'd uncovered, the memories they'd pieced together, and the lives they'd touched along the way. This wasn't the end. It was merely the beginning of something greater. "Then we'll keep going," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "Together." As the stars emerged outside, casting their light over the quiet Vermont countryside, Claire realized that Elliot's legacy wasn't confined to journals, tapes, or even the mysteries they'd unraveled. It was a gift, the ability to listen, to remember, and to honor the voices carried on the wind. And so, under the watchful gaze of the spiral-marked tree and guided by whispers older than time itself, Claire and Noah stepped boldly into the unknown, ready to carry the torch of memory into whatever future awaited them.